This is it. This is Rome. This is Rome. This is a second look at the empire that never existed. The engineering of the Roman Empire, the one that is written in much literature throughout the years, but yet the one that does not and never did exist. Roman Empire, the empire that was engineered, the empire that was made up, the empire that never existed. The Roman Empire is the Caucasian's way. It is the Caucasian's attempt to create a history for himself. The Roman Empire is the Caucasian's attempt to cover up his identity and cover up his origin, where that origin is from the fallen angels. Now, the Roman Empire, we have already looked at and covered the evidence that the Roman Empire, the fictitious Roman Empire, it was engineered and structured and built upon two main primary elements, which are the Lydian kingdom and the Pelasgians. And the Pelasgians, they were a mixture of various tribes of black people. They were the indigenous Greeks. And those two elements are what the Caucasians during the 18th and 19th centuries, those are the two elements that they used to build, construct, and engineer a fictitious Roman Empire. Now, one of the things about the Roman Empire is that the Roman Empire, it is not mentioned in the Old Testament. The Roman Empire is not mentioned in the Torah. There's absolutely no hint and no mention, no alluding to a so-called Roman Empire. The Empire of Greece is mentioned in the Torah. It is mentioned with the usage of the word Kittim. And Kittim is properly pronounced Kitty. But Greece is mentioned in the Torah. Macedon is mentioned in the Torah. Babylon is mentioned in the Torah. Assyria and Syria, they are mentioned in the Torah, as well as Nineveh, Medes, Persia, Egypt, and many other ancient kingdoms and nations. They are mentioned in the Torah. Seir and Idumea, the Amalekites, Moab, and many more nations are mentioned in the Torah. And these nations, they were at odds with the Hebrews, and many of them captured Jerusalem and burned the city, such as Babylon, with Nebuchadnezzar, captured Jerusalem and burned the city. But Rome, which is said to have captured Judea in 63 BC, Rome is not mentioned in the Torah, and that is for a reason. And that reason is, it never existed. That is the reason why Rome is nowhere to be found in the Torah, because it never existed. (711 AD). The Moors. The word Moor, M-O-O-R, is derived from the Greek word Maros, spelled M-A-U-R-O-S. And Maros, that means black or very dark. The word Moor, it is not connected, associated with any religion or any specific group or tribe of people. Moor refers to a color, a specific color. It refers to black and very dark. That is Moor. The Caucasian was in a dark age, and the Dark Ages were from 476 AD to 1200 AD. But what caused the Caucasian to go into a dark age? What was going on in the geographical locations of all land outside of Africa that caused the Caucasian to be in a dark age? You see, all land outside of Africa, those lands were inhabited by cavemen, people that dwelt in caves, and these people, these beings, these entities, they are classified as non-human, and their descendants, they are the ones that dwelt in caves. Their ancestors were in caves, and the seed from these beings continued to dwelling in caves. And it was up to the Moors. The Moors are the ones who left Africa and went into these lands where cavemen and women were dwelling. They went there and they civilized these beings, these entities, who we call Caucasian. Under the rulership of the Moors came civilization for the Caucasian. During this 800 years of rulership by the Moors, they introduced new scientific techniques to the Caucasians, to Europe, and scientific progress in astronomy, chemistry, physics, mathematics, geography, philosophy, and many more. They flourish under the rulership of the Moors. These things and many other things were introduced, and the Caucasian started to become slowly civilized. The Moors, they created a city called Cordova, and it was the most modern city in Europe. The streets were well paved with raised sidewalks for pedestrians, and during the night, 10 miles of streets were well illuminated by lamps. And this was 100 years or more before there was paved streets in Paris, and before any street lamps existed in London. And Cordova, that city, it had 900 public baths. Civilization for the Caucasian in Europe was beginning to happen. Before the Moors came to Europe, the people in Europe, the Caucasians, descendants of beings that are classified as non-human, the Caucasians, they were illiterate and still in caves. The Moors, they established 17 universities located in various areas throughout Europe. Some areas as Almeria, Cordova, Granada, Juan, Malaga, and Seville, and many more. And the Moors established more than 70 public libraries. Music was brought to the uncivilized Europe, the uncivilized Caucasian. The Moors, they introduced many new crops, including the orange, lemon, peach, apricot, fig, sugarcane, dates, ginger, and pomegranate, and many, many more. And they also introduced the saffron. It is no wonder these so-called Spanish, the Spanish rice that is so famous in Spain, that rice was introduced by the Moors. The sugar cane, the cotton, silk, the rice, all of this and many more products that were introduced, brought in by the Moors. The Caucasian was underway to be civilized, and such civilization was brought to the Caucasian by the Black Moors. During the Middle Ages, or during the Dark Ages, in all the cities, and territories, and lands where the Caucasian dwelt outside of Africa, in these areas, there was always a stench, a smell of bad odor, a odor of sewage and decaying bodies. There was a smell of human feces and urine in the streets, decaying wood and wrecked dung, spoiled coal and animal fat. During the Dark Ages, the Caucasian went backwards, did not make any advancement at all. The Roman Empire, the engineering of the Roman Empire, is the Caucasian's way of weaving himself in history and creating a history for himself. And the Roman Empire is started to fall in 395 AD, and the fall was completed in 476 AD. And after the Roman Empire fell, the fictitious Roman Empire, after it fell, the Caucasian has constructed as an explanation for his condition in the Dark Ages. He says that the Roman Empire was the cause of the Dark Ages. All of the so-called internal unrest, civil unrest, political unrest in the fictitious Roman Empire, these are used as an explanation, a reason for the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages are the level of development of the Caucasian. You see, the Caucasian was living in caves. He started to emerge from those caves and started to develop slowly. And that slow pace of development, that is the Dark Ages. So the Dark Ages, again, is the level of development of the Caucasian. And this is Discover Magazine, You Are Not Human, published in 2011. The Caucasian, with this publication and with the research that went into finding the information, the Caucasian finally admits to the truth that all Caucasians, including the so-called Oriental and the Latinos, they finally admit to the truth that they come from the interbreeding with Neanderthal, Denisovan, and many other beings that are not human. So the study has been done, and it is being done. It's continuing on as well to this day. But the evidence is out there that the Caucasian has extra DNA that is not human. And again, this Discover Magazine, it was published in 2011. You Are Not Human, Your New Identity. 3% Neanderthal, up to 5% Denisovan, and a whole lot of bizarre earlier ancestors. And again, Discover Magazine, Homo sapiens, meet your new astounding family. This is an excerpt from this article, and it admits to the scientists have learned that anatomically modern humans, and when they say modern humans, they're not talking about black people. This phrase modern human is in reference to the Caucasian only. Anatomically modern humans interbred with Homo neanderthalensis, or the Neanderthals. And this data here, 60,000 years ago, is incorrect, but the interbreeding is correct. And they also place it in the Middle East is where this occurred. This is where these scientists went in and did the research, found the remains of human remains and Neanderthal and Denisovan in the Middle East, Southwest Asia area. This is where the interbreeding took place, outside of Africa. When the seed of Japheth migrated in two ways. They went outside of Africa, and the fallen angels, the territory, their land is all lands outside of Africa. So when the seed of Japheth went out of Africa, that's when the interbreeding took place. The interbreeding, and according to this article, it first took place in the Middle East. The Middle East. And it is these beings, the Tahunian and Kaiman and more, these are the beings, their ancestors are the ones, the fake Jews, who are claiming the history and scriptures of the original black Jews. And so the Dark Ages is the level of development of the Caucasian. You see, the Caucasian during the Dark Ages, he developed to a level of animalistic, barbaric, uncivilized, and a warmonger. That is the level of the development of the Caucasian. He made no advancement in the age and condition of the Caucasian during this time period. It is called the Dark Age, and it only applies to the Caucasian. And that is when the Moors in 711 AD, they stepped in and they civilized the Caucasian, who was on the level of animalistic, barbaric, uncivilized, and a warmonger. And again, the Dark Age, that is reference to the level that the Caucasian developed to. And if we were to include the fictitious Roman Empire in the level of the development of the Caucasian, which is the Dark Age, the fictitious Roman Empire will just generate many questions that will not and cannot be answered, such as the fictitious Roman Empire is said to have public baths. Well, how did the Caucasian lose sight of bathing? And during the Dark Age, he did not bathe. That's one of the discrepancies. And there are many more. During the Roman Empire, the people are said to have public baths and public toilets. During the Dark Age, the Caucasian lost sight of all of that and used a pot for a toilet and dumped the feces out in the public streets. How did the Caucasian lose sight of that civilized behavior? In the Roman Empire, the Caucasian, he was civilized. During the Dark Ages, the Caucasian, he was uncivilized. So how did the Caucasian go from civilized to uncivilized? These are just many discrepancies and unanswered questions that cannot be answered. During the fictitious Roman Empire, the Caucasian had music. During the Dark Ages, there was no music. It had to be introduced by the Moors. During the Roman Empire, there was water irrigation and aqueducts and architecture. During the Dark Age, how did the Caucasian immediately lose sight and knowledge of that technology and could not in any way construct waterways, aqueducts, and irrigation? How did he lose sight of that when the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD and the Dark Ages began the same year in 476 AD? So how did the Caucasian lose all of that technology and knowledge of his day in the Roman Empire and lose all of that the same year and could not make any advancements at all? During the Roman Empire, there was sciences, mathematics, astronomy, physics, and chemistry. All of that was stolen from Egypt, but nonetheless it is said that it was in the fictitious Roman Empire. Well, if that is true, then how did the Caucasian lose sight of all of the social sciences and it had to be introduced and taught to him in the Dark Ages? And keep in mind, the Dark Age began the same year that the Roman Empire is said to have fallen in 476 AD. During the fictitious Roman Empire, there was culture and civilization. There was laws and morality. Well, how did the Caucasian, during the Dark Age, how did he lose sight of all of that? The civilization, the culture, the morality, the laws. How did he lose sight of all of that knowledge and understanding during the same year, 476 AD, the same year when the Roman Empire fell, and the same year when the Dark Ages began? These are more discrepancies and questions that cannot be answered. And all of these discrepancies, they are proving the point that the Roman Empire, the fictitious Roman Empire, is not the cause of the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages is just the level of development of the Caucasian, the uncivilized being. During the fictitious Roman Empire, the language was Latin. Well, how did the Caucasian, during the Dark Age, how did he immediately lose his ability to speak Latin? How did the Latin end so abruptly and quickly? The Latin language ended the same year the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD. And how did the Caucasian lose his ability to speak Latin that quickly? You see, during the Dark Ages, the Moors, they had to teach the Caucasian how to read and write. So what really happened? what really happened to the Caucasian, because the Roman Empire is not the reason nor answer to the condition of the Caucasian during the Dark Ages. What really happened is that the Caucasian started to emerge from the caves and develop very slowly, but he was still animalistic, barbaric, uncivilized, and a warmonger. And that is the Dark Age for the Caucasian. That was his condition for over 900 years. And it took the Moors in 711 AD to leave Africa, go in the lands of the beings that are not human, and civilize them. That is the history that the Caucasian is trying to keep hidden. And the engineering of the Roman Empire is just the Caucasian's way of weaving himself into history and giving himself a cause for his condition of being barbaric, uncivilized, and animalistic. The only thing that the Caucasian have to this day that can be consistent with a fictitious Roman Empire is that the Caucasian is the only being on earth that is a warmonger. And that is the state and saying from the Most High that Esau will live by the sword. That is a prophecy from the Most High, and that is the reason the Caucasian is the only being that is a warmonger. But that's the Dark Ages. It is the condition of the Caucasian. It is the level of development of the Caucasian. The Caucasian came out of the caves, and he developed to the level of animalistic, barbaric, uncivilized, and a warmonger. That was his level of development. And it took the black Moors to come to their land full of cave people, and civilize them. And the Moors ruled for 800 years, some say 900 years. But after that rulership, the Caucasian grasped onto civilization, and they ousted the Moors. And that's when the Caucasian experienced a rebirth, and then an enlightenment, and then started whitewashing history. This is a chart of the Dark Ages, and the Dark Ages, that is the condition of the Caucasian. It is the level of development of the Caucasian. It is the level that the Caucasian developed and made his improvement to. And that level of development, that level is animalistic, barbaric, uncivilized, a warmonger. That is the Dark Ages, and that's the level that the Caucasian developed to. The Caucasian is the only being on earth that is a warmonger. And this behavior of the Caucasian, it has been prophesied. It is the scripture, and it is the words of the Most High, that Esau, he will live by the sword. And the Caucasian today, the modern Caucasian, has the seed of Esau as well mixed in his blood. Esau mixed his seed, the seed of Esau, his lineage. They mixed their seed with the fallen angels. And the modern Caucasian today comes from that mixture, as well as the constant interbreeding among the fallen angels, producing giants, and more interbreeding constantly happened. And Esau came on the scene and mixed his seed, or Esau, his descendants, mixed their seed with these beings. And that is the modern Caucasian today. And so that verse, that prophecy that says Esau is the end of the world, and Esau shall live by the sword. Both verses are referring to the modern Caucasian today. But this is the Dark Age. It is the level of development of the Caucasian, and that level is animalistic, barbaric, uncivilized, and a warmonger. And this chart, the condition of the Caucasian, started in 476 AD, and that is the same year that it is said that the theoretical fictional Roman Empire, it fell in 476 AD. And when you compare that theory of the Roman Empire, the fictional Roman Empire, you compare that to the historical event of the Dark Age, it will produce a lot of discrepancies. A lot of lies will be revealed. When you compare the fictional, the theory of the Roman Empire, you compare that to the historical event of the Moors in 70 AD, civilizing the Caucasian. When you make that comparison, that will also produce a lot of discrepancies. A lot of lies will be revealed. The Caucasian, he was not around in the BC time period. He was not in Africa. He was in his own lands. The land of the Caucasian are all lands outside of Africa. That is where the interbreeding took place. The interbreeding between the fallen angels and the seed of Japheth. It took place outside of Africa. Many geneticists and scientists, they say that it took place in the so-called Middle East. And that is outside of Africa. Now those are the lands of the Caucasian. And that's where the Caucasian was dwelling for hundreds of years during the entire time of the so-called BC time period. The Caucasian never set foot in Africa. The Caucasian stayed within his own lands. And he was slowly developing, living in caves. And as time went on, in 476 AD, this is the time period when the Caucasian, he was still in caves, but he started to slowly emerge from the caves. He started to come out of the caves. And he was slowly emerging from the caves all the way to 711 AD. This is when the Moors, they left Africa and they went into the land of the Caucasians, of the cavemen. They went there and they civilized the Caucasians. They brought a lot of culture, civilization, social sciences, laws and orders, proper way of dressing, bathing, hygiene, proper way of cooking food and storing it, spices, libraries, universities, irrigation, water, hot water and cold water, crops, how to plant crops and grow them. They brought all facets of living, of life, of civilization and culture, music as well. The mathematics, chemistry, geometry, biology, physics, astronomy, and a lot more. They built many cities. One of them was Cordova. Built many cities, paved roads and street lights, and a lot more. The black Moors brought that and taught that to the Caucasian, taught them how to read and write. Now these things are historical. The Roman Empire is not, it's fictional. But when you compare the historical event of the Caucasian and you compare the historical event of the Moors, you compare both of those events to the fictional Roman Empire, a lot of discrepancies will be revealed, a lot of lies, such as the fall of the Roman Empire, that is said to be one of the greatest civilizations of its day. But the condition of the Caucasian was one of uncivilized, animalistic, and barbaric, and the Caucasian was illiterate. The Dark Age began in 476 AD. The fall of Rome happened in 476 AD. There's a discrepancy there. How can the Caucasian in the Roman Empire be civilized in 476 AD and within that same year become uncivilized and illiterate? Because the Dark Ages began 476 AD, the same year that the so-called Roman Empire fell. That is a discrepancy there, and it is basically a lie of the Caucasian. The Caucasian is using the fictional Roman Empire as a cause for his condition, and he uses the Roman Empire as a way to construct and build a history for himself. But none of these things hold up. There are more discrepancies. The people in the Roman Empire, they bathed daily. They had public baths and toilets. They bathed daily. When the Caucasian went through the Dark Ages, how can he lose sight of bathing daily and bathe only once or twice a year, sometimes none? How can he lose sight of the hygiene that he once had and not too long ago? And how can he lose his language? How can he become illiterate, cannot read and write, when he was just in a civilization where there's learning, schools, universities, libraries? He was just there in 476 AD. His condition of the Dark Ages happened in 476 AD. There should be no way of the Caucasian losing sight and becoming illiterate. There's no way the Caucasian can lose his civilization and become uncivilized within the same year. So these are just some of the discrepancies and lies that are embedded in the whole fictional Roman Empire, and placing the Caucasian as the people of the Roman Empire. But Rome is fictional, never existed, but it applies to the Lydian Empire, and the people of the Lydian Empire, they all were black. All black people. And those people were from the descendants of Asher. But the Lydian Empire was taken over by the Pelasgian Greeks. And the Pelasgian Greeks, those are the people that were ruling during the AD time period. They're the ones that tore down Jerusalem and Judah and the remaining tribes in Israel. But nonetheless, this chart here shows that this is when the Caucasians start to emerge. In 476 AD, 711 AD, the Moors arrived to the Caucasian land and territory outside of Africa, and they ruled that region for 800 years, some say 900 years, all the way to 1200 AD. This is when the Caucasian, from 1300 AD to 1699 AD, this is the time period when the Caucasian had his rebirth. From 711 to 1200, he was civilized and taught how to be human. Taught civilization, culture, social sciences, and more. From 7-Eleven to here, he's been schooled and taught by black Moors. And once the Caucasian grasped and understood civilization, then he had a rebirth. And that started in the 1300s AD and lasted to 1699 AD. This is the rebirth. And during this time period, he's building his cities, his towns, regions, all throughout the so-called Europe. He's gaining strength, and he's going to oust and get rid of the Moors. And he's going to start the whole thing of the transatlantic slave. From the rebirth came the Enlightenment. From the Renaissance, which is the rebirth, came the Enlightenment period. And the Enlightenment is when the Caucasian, that's when he grasps civilization. That's when he finally understood it and had a game plan of ruling and taking over the world. And in these events, we can see the Most High at work in fulfilling his purpose and his will, having this whole world on a guided course in fulfilling his will. And one of his will that is written in scripture is Esau will live by the sword. The Dark Age, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment period, these events are fulfilling the prophecy from the Most High that says Esau will live by the sword, and that says Esau is the end of the world. So these three events, they were necessary to happen, and these events are fulfilling the will of the Most High, fulfilling the prophecy of the Most High that is written in scripture. So the Most High rose up the Caucasian and brought him to this level. The rebirth, enlightenment, the Caucasian ousted the Moors, stole the black history, and whitewashed everything that is black. He stole all the lands of Africa and hijacked them and placed them in his land. This is the reason why we find African names all in the so-called Europe and Asia area. You see, Rome is really located in Africa, but it's not under the name Rome. It's the Lydian Empire. Greece, on the other hand, Greece is located in Africa and always has been there. But we find the Caucasian hijacked it, stole it and hijacked it and placed it in his land. And the so-called Arabia, the Caucasian stole that. That is in Africa, Arabia. And it is called the Araba. And it is a region of land that extends from the Keres region in Namibia, Southwest Africa. It extends from there and goes all the way up the Shefala. And it extends to the Comus Highland Plateau area where the Windhoek is. All of that is the Arabia or the Araba. The Caucasians stole it and placed it in the region called Saudi Arabia. You see, these are the lands of the Caucasian because these lands outside of Africa, that's where the interbreeding of the fallen angels took place. But nonetheless, all of this happened, and from 1815 to the present, the whitewashing continues. It has not stopped and is not going to stop. All of these historical events, this is the Most High fulfilling his prophecy, fulfilling his word, keeping his word and fulfilling it, creating a people, the Caucasian, that is called Esau, and making him the end of the world and the one that is going to live by the sword. And again, this is why we find in the Dark Ages that it is only the Caucasian, the only being on earth that is a warmonger. No other being throughout history, all the way to today, presently, no other being has been a warmonger like the Caucasian. And it is for a reason, a purpose. And that purpose is to fulfill the words and prophecy of the Most High. And it is this Esau that is driving the world into the ground, into the end. But the Renaissance, Enlightenment period, and whitewashing, these things are modern. The Dark Age is modern. From 476 AD to the present. That's not too long of a period. This is less than 2,000 years. And we're getting a good view of the presence of the Caucasian. The Caucasian is a Johnny-come-lately. He's new to the earth. He hasn't been on this earth more than 2,000 years. It's less than that. But we have been deceived in thinking that he has been here for a long period of time. But nonetheless, this chart, it charts the behavior, the presence of the Caucasian. And it is very important, hugely important, that all believers, all Hebrews, and all black people in general get a good understanding and really grasp Numbers chapter 24 verse 24 that speaks of a group of people coming from Kittim, and these people are going to afflict Asher and Eber. That is their prophecy in Numbers 24 verse 24, that there's going to be some people that come from Kittim, and they will afflict Asher and they will afflict Eber. Now the Most High, that prophecy was given to Moses. The Most High is letting us know clearly that those who are going to rule over Eber, they're coming from Kittim. That rules out any notion, idea of Rome. That rules out any notion, any idea of any other empire and nation. It is only Kittim that will rule over Eber, which is Israel. Rule over Asher, which are the descendants of Asher. Only Kittim, and Kittim is Greece. Kittim is they are the descendants of Javan. Javan is a descendant, the son of Japheth. So it is Kittim, it is Greece. The Greeks are the one that tore down Jerusalem during the 70 AD destruction. The Greeks were the one that tore down the remaining cities of Judah and Israel in the 132 to 136 AD destruction. It was the Greeks, the Pelasgian Greeks. Keep in mind, the Greeks, they were divided into two parts. It started off dividing themselves into 4 tribes, and then there were 4 converted over time into just mainly 2 groups, which were the Athenian and Spartans. And Spartans were Dorians, the Athenians Ionians. And the Dorians and Spartans, they are Pelagians, or were Pelagians. Pelagian Greeks, all of them were black, and genetically the same people, same as Ethiopians. But with this Kittim, with this prophecy, Kittim is Cyprus, and it is the reason why the original black Jews, they call Cyprus Kittim. Kittim is properly pronounced Kitty, but it is transliterated as Kittim, spelled with a K and also spelled with a CH. But the K, every letter is going to be K, T, and T. The M is not there. But the K is the ancient every letter cuff, and the picture of a palm. And it means bend and opening. The bend and an opening the T is the Tau or Tav, and that is a mark or sign, signal, monument. The Tav in Hebrew, the Tav, or rather the mark, the Tav is the mark. But the word mark, and this is going to be somewhat interesting. The word mark is the Hebrew ka'aka. It's the Hebrew ka'aka, spelled Q-A-A-Q-A, ka'aka. That's how you pronounce it, ka'aka. And that is going to be the every letter Q and the Aleph. So that's the word mark. The every letter T is the Tav, and it means mark. But the word mark is the Hebrew word ka'aka. And again, it's every letter Q and Aleph. The Q, the every letter Q is Kaf. And this is the picture of Kaf. The every letter Kaf. It's a circle with a line, horizontal line. And when we look at that, and keep in mind the original black Jews in usage of the every language, they always use the language to describe a person or something in the earth or the earth itself. It's always used in those two ways. And so this is not referring to a person, so we look to the earth for the meaning. And when we look at the every letter, the Q, which is Kaf, again, it's a circle and a line in the middle. And we look at Cyprus. Cyprus, the geographical region of Cyprus, is in the shape of the Kaf. This is the circle. This is circle here, and the line here, that's this extension here, this peninsula. The circle and this line, that is symbolic, that represents, that is the shape of the every letter Kaf. And again, Kaf, this is the letter Q, and with the Aleph, it means mark. And mark is the every letter T, the top. So when we put these together, it gives Kittim. Kittim is Cyprus. And this, the Kaf, is this opening here. This is the bend. This is the bend here. The bend, it has an opening. This is what they Kaf, this is what the Q is referring to. This location, this region right here, with the bend, and with that bend, there's an opening. The land, it separates and opens up with a bend. So this is the Kaf. This is what the original black Jews were looking at and were referring to when they say Kaf. They're referring to this bend and this opening, describing this. They're giving a description of this land. And the Q is going to refer to all of this, the circular part with this peninsula. So you have the Q, which is the Kaf, and the K, the Kaf, which means bend and opening, and a mark with their Tav, mark, sign. All of this is a reference to the people, the location of the people that's going to rule Eber and Asher. And it is this location only that the Most High is giving. He let us know that it's this location in Africa, not outside of Africa. So with this information, it becomes clear that those who are going to rule Eber and Asher, they're going to come out of Africa. out of Cyprus, Kittim. They're going to come from this location, and they are the one that's going to be ruling. They are the one that's going to be the kingdom of iron. And this is Cyprus is one of the regions of the Pelasgian Greeks. These are the ones who took over the Greek Empire, took over the Lydian Empire, and they ruled the kingdom of iron all the way to present, to today. The kingdom of iron, it was divided. It fell and it divided up into 10 nations. And that's where the feet with the iron and clay mixture. That's where we are at prophetically. But this is the nation that ruled the kingdom of iron with the Pelasgian Greeks, and that ruled out any idea of a Rome. Now, once we understand that information, that it's going to be the Greeks that's ruling, not in a Rome, a fictional Rome, we should further understand that the modern Rome, that is not any nation, any empire of history. We should understand and know that it is fictional, and all things in it has nothing to do with history, such as the so-called Roman Colosseum. That is not historical. That is something that was constructed and made up in the 18th and 19th centuries. The Ark of Titus as well, that was constructed and made up, a replica in the 18th and 19th centuries. You see, the Ark of Titus, that is Greek, not Roman, and it has been confiscated and stolen by the Vatican among other interest groups. And a replica of it has been made, and that is the one that is shown in museums in Europe today. That is not the real Ark of Titus. That is not the one that was located in Africa. It's not that one. It is a copy of the original. And that copy is the one that's put in museums that people can go and take a look at. But the land outside of Africa is land full of cave people. The Roman Empire never existed. It's the Lydian kingdom, and the people of that kingdom were black. They were all black from Asia. And Lydia was taken over by the Pelasgian Greeks. They were black, and they ruled. And they tore down the Jerusalem. They made an ark, and it was not called the Ark of Titus. Titus is a fictional person. All the names, Vespasian, Nero, Caesar, all of those names are fictitious. Those names are people that never existed. But nonetheless, the Lydian Empire, and again, the Lydian Empire was taken over by the Pelasgian Greeks, and that is historical. That is what occurred in history. And the fall, the so-called fall of the fictional Roman Empire, was never a cause for the condition of the Caucasian, because the Roman Empire never existed.